essentially working 2 full-time jobs by the time I launched the second campaign, Euphoria. And at that time, I started to think about that option, and I asked my boss at my full-time job if I could take a 20% pay cut and work 1 fewer day a week. And so just work 4 days a week and spend that extra day working on Stonemaier Games. And so eventually, after testing that out for 6 months, I realized, okay, I can make this work.
What's up, guys? Welcome to Masters of Crowdfunding. You have Mark Pecota today, and I am going to be joined by Jamey Stegmaier, who is a legend in the crowdfunding space. He's actually a crowdfunding OG, goes back to 2011 with his very first launch, where he did $305. So go check that out. The next one did a little bit more with viticulture, which is where he really got into the groove of launching his own games. And he actually went on to launch 7 more games on Kickstarter, 7 games total on Kickstarter up until 2015, which was his last one, where he did 1.8 million. And he ended up stopping doing Kickstarter at that point and went to launching on his own site through retailers, distributors. So he's a wealth of knowledge. Just this episode was a lot of fun to record. I learned a lot personally. I think you will learn a lot too. He talks about marketing strategies, even going back before that, how he transitioned from a full-time job over to doing this full time with games. And so again, there's a lot for you to learn in this episode. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Masters of Crowdfunding. All right, Jamey, we are live. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Mark, thanks for having me.
Of course, excited to dive in today. Before we go into, all your knowledge, I read that you actually never say no to a podcast. You're also completely prolific when it comes to blogging. You've written a book. Of course, you're running your business as well. I'm just so curious, why do you give back so much?
Well, that's a fair question. Yeah, time is definitely my most precious resource, probably yours as well, a lot of people's. But I find from every conversation I have with anyone, whether it's in this format, whether it's on my YouTube channel or on the blog and the comments, things like that, that I am processing something out loud or in writing and learning from that as I'm processing it. And hopefully other people are learning from that information. And by putting that information out there, I think publicly, rather than having like a private conversation, then hopefully a lot of people are benefiting. I think that's a good use of my time if I do that. And I'm also learning a lot from the conversation that ensues. So it isn't entirely altruistic. I learn a lot, and hopefully the resulting benefit is a lot of people for a long time after that can tap into that knowledge as well.
Right. I totally agree. Like when people ask me, do something similar, like constantly writing, constantly actually putting things just out there or speaking if I'm asked. And it's not, completely altruistic for me either. Like there is like let's even call it like a selfish component where I am gaining something from it. So I completely agree. So, most of the world knows you for all the games that you've launched, but actually was looking that the very first campaign that you ever launched was not actually a game. It was for a company called Blank Slate Press back in 2011. Can you tell us what was that campaign? You raised $305 for that. What's the story behind that one?
Yeah, you did your research. So that campaign. So I was fascinated by Kickstarter from the day that Kickstarter launched. I was just fascinated to run a Kickstarter campaign, and at the time, I was focused a little bit more on my other passion, which was writing, largely fiction writing. And I had become involved in a local kind of literary group where we'd all write something and get together and talk about it. And from that group, we formed a few of us formed a very small publishing company, book publishing company. And I thought, okay, why not take this little side project that I'm working on with some friends and try to run a Kickstarter campaign, because I'd seen a few authors leverage the platform pretty well. It is, looking back, I got very lucky that the campaign even funded. I tried to do some weird stuff with it that was not a good idea, but I learned from that. I learned that sometimes simplicity and focus can be more beneficial than gimmicks, I think.
Right. Well, a year later, you did launch your first game with viticulture. At that time, though, and it was very successful. You did $65,000 for the first launch, which is great. But I actually want to go back a little bit. Like, how did you get into designing board games? What was that? Like, what was the impetus for that?
Yeah, I've been playing games and designing games pretty much my whole life. Like I'm sure I was playing games when I was 6 or 7, 8 years old. I think it was probably when I was around 7 or 8, maybe 9, that I played a game and decided that I wanted to design my own version of it. And that was a lot of what I designed when I was a kid. I would play a game and make my own version of it. And then as an adult, I continued to dabble in it a little bit here and there. I had other responsibilities and hobbies as I grew, and especially in adulthood. And then I returned to modern gaming with a few games like Catan and Agricola and Stone Age. In looking back, I'm 42 now. I think it was in my late 20s, maybe my early 30s. And that's when I started rekindling this interest in game design as something that might be something to do still as a hobby, but a little bit beyond just the initial design stage. Because back when I was a kid, I would design the game, I would play it once, and I'd be done with it. And that is the smallest part of game design. So much game design, like creating anything, is the iteration, the revisions that happen later. Yeah. Have you dabbled in it at all, or is that not part of your passions?
No, it's not part of my passions. That's why I find it so fascinating to understand, like, your passion, also how you turn that passion into a business as well, which I really, really want to get into. I'm like very fascinated by the transition as well from, let's call it like the normal 9-to-5 day-to-day work, transitioning over to making your passion into a full-time business. So when you first launched Viticulture, you had a full-time job, correct?
Right, that's right.
What were you doing at that point?
Yeah, I was working as the director of operations at a facility on campus here in St. Louis at a university called Washington University in St. Louis.
Got it.
So that was my full-time job.
Got it. And how did you actually like learn how to design the board game? Like, was it like trial and error? You said you were doing it when you were a kid, but how did it go from that to like, this is actually, I would say, like a professional level quality game that you're going to now launch on Kickstarter?
Yeah, it was a lot of trial and error. It was just me studying what other games were doing, playing a lot of other games, researching them, and iterating, making a prototype, playtesting it with some friends, and eventually my co-founder Alan, and playing it and iterating and trying to make it fun and intuitive and balanced. So yeah, there was I think very few game designers I think have formal education. They're just playing and learning as they go.
So you said you have a co-founder, so Alan is his name?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was with you from the very beginning?
He came in maybe 4 or 5 months in. So at that time, I spent a fair amount of time working through what I wanted the game to be, or what I thought I wanted it to be, and playtesting it with friends. And I'd usually feel guilty playtesting with friends because we could have been playing like a real game that we were having fun with, but instead we were playing a game that wasn't very good at all at the time. And one of those times I'd playtested with Alan and his wife Erin, and for the first time of all those playtests with friends, Alan reached out to me the next day and was like, "Hey, I had a lot of fun doing that. That was fun for me, even though the game wasn't fun yet. I had fun being part of that process. Can I do it again? Can we do it again?" And that was really exciting to me, to have someone else who was willing and excited to play a game that was very much still in progress. And so that formed a new type of friendship with Alan, where he became my lead playtester, basically. We get together and playtest the game and iterate and go from there.
So when you were working on this game at the beginning, did you have the goal and aspiration to turn it into a full-time business, or was it just a hobby?
At the time, it was really just a hobby. I had very low expectations for it. I just wanted to self-publish a game and put it on Kickstarter, hopefully have some fun connections with people who were excited about it as well, and see where it took me. I didn't even consider really that we had a company until we successfully funded it, and really not even until we successfully delivered the game. So there are games that are funded, or there are many products that are funded and aren't ever actually delivered. So yeah, I kept my sights on my full-time job. I was essentially working 2 full-time jobs by the time I launched the second campaign, Euphoria. And at that time, I started to think about that option, and I asked my boss at my full-time job if I could take a 20% pay cut and work 1 fewer day a week. And so just work 4 days a week and spend that extra day working on Stonemaier Games. And so eventually, after testing that out for 6 months, I realized, okay, I could make this work for at least a year and give it a try. And so I went full-time at Stonemaier at that point.
What an awesome boss to let you do that. That's awesome.
I knew what to say to him. I knew to say, hey, I could save you 20% of my salary
Right.
Do the same amount of work. I didn't ask for any like fewer responsibilities.
Oh, okay.
I didn't have to come in 1 day a week. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. So you do this, you're now working 4 days a week at your job. And then you said you did that for about 6 months. And then you had like a year long of runway. Is that what you said?
That's exactly right. Yeah. I at that point we were in the process of delivering the second game, and we had enough in profit in the bank basically to fund the company for a year if I wanted to give that a try. So I talked to Alan about it. Alan was fine with me trying it. And at that point, I hadn't actually been paid anything by the company anyway. So that was where I was, for the first time, going to take any sort of money from the company to live on, and it worked out. Yeah, that first year worked out. So I kept on going.
Got it. And I'm just curious. Like, I mean, if you feel comfortable sharing, I mean, how much were you actually like making from the game at like the very beginning when you went full time? Like.
Yeah, like me personally, or the company?
Like you personally, to be able to, do this and have that like fund your lifestyle at that point in your life. I think it's interesting for people to even hear that, because for me, like especially in crowdfunding, but starting businesses in general, I think there's a lot of, I don't know, like understanding the money component of it and like how much people are actually making, especially at the beginning, is kind of this thing that not a lot of people talk about. And it could be helpful for first-time creators just to understand that.
I want to answer accurately. I don't exactly remember how much.
Yeah, I'm having you go back like a decade.
I think I essentially replaced my previous salary, which was I think around maybe 50,000, which is actually somewhat high, I think, for the game industry even now, which is ridiculous. The game industry, we've tried to bump up salaries, at least at Stonemaier Games, and mine has certainly increased since then. But yeah, I think I was essentially replacing my same salary. And part of what we built into that when we talked about it is I decided to never take a royalty on the games that I designed that Stonemaier Games published. So usually when a designer designs a game and they have another publisher make it, that designer gets a royalty on revenue. And I just decided I didn't want that. I wanted part of my job to be game design. And so that was just kind of built into my salary from day one. So I profited definitely very indirectly from our games, but never directly. I've just taken a salary from the company.
Oh, really? Interesting. And now I want to go to like the decision to go off of Kickstarter. I know you've wrote about this a lot. You've talked about this a lot. There's definitely new people on that are listening to this podcast that probably don't know about it. So with Scythe, you did, I believe it was 1.8 million. This was the last campaign that you launched on Kickstarter, your biggest campaign as well. I mean, ending on a high note. And then and then you're like, okay, I'm not going to be doing Kickstarter anymore. But you're still launching products through, well, actually, I'll let you talk about it, or I'd love for you to talk about it. What was your decision, or what went into your decision to stop using Kickstarter? And then a follow-up question to that would be, what was your strategy then for launching new products?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's definitely evolved over time. At the time, the decision came down to a few different factors. One was related to fulfillment. We had some successful fulfillment partners and one unexpectedly very bad fulfillment partner. And so at the time, I thought, okay, I want to move away from Kickstarter. I want to move away from just selling directly to consumers. I'll just sell to distributors and retailers and not add this extra risk factor of a fulfillment center that doesn't follow through on their promises. That ended up changing over time. We actually moved back to selling both to distributors, retailers, and to consumers. But at the time, that was part of it. There was also, I saw some very odd things happen, I think, with human behavior that summer when we were delivering Scythe. Scythe funded in late 2015. We made the game that we promised that we were going to make. We shipped it to people on time. And yet there was a lot of turmoil that summer, I think, from people who say they didn't get their shipping notification first of all, 20,000 people getting their copies. And they were yelling and complaining that they weren't the first ones, even though we had to ship a lot of games. It was just a very odd, emotionally tumultuous summer. And at the end of it, I sat down with Alan with that as in play and the fulfillment and a few other smaller factors. And I was like, what if we didn't do this again? What if we just made a game that we really believed in instead of checking with other people first to see if they believed in the same thing, and made it. And when we were done making it, that we would announce it and sell it to people. And that's what we tried to do. We did it first with distributors, retailers, and eventually that was with Charterstone. And then after Charterstone, we brought in some other games where we used that system, where we made the game, we made something that we were excited about, we announced it to people, we shared what that game is, and that was after we'd actually made the game, and then we would start selling it to people within a few weeks. We did this very recently with our new game Apiary, and that is the system that we've made little tweaks to since then, with the main benefit being that we no longer have that gap that Kickstarter requires. People can get excited about something that we announce and actually have it in their hands within a few weeks rather than waiting an indeterminate amount of time to actually get it.
Right. So when it comes to the actual, let's say, like game design process, are you including, let's say, any part of your community in that, or is it like a very closed process? In terms of closed, like meaning like it's your internal team doing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because one of the things that we take out of the equation when we moved away from Kickstarter is the giant check and balance of, do people actually want this, or what kind of feedback is the general public going to give us? And so it became a really big focus for us to hone our playtester and proofreader / oversight team. So these are paid volunteers, people that we reach out to who are part of the general Stonemaier Games community, where I'll send a game to them and say, hey, can you playtest this game? Can you print out this game at home and playtest it and offer me your unbiased feedback on it? So we do a lot of that blind playtesting for any game. I coordinate it. I take in that feedback and try to use it to make the game better and more fun, more balanced, more intuitive. And then when the game is ready, I have an oversight team, again, paid volunteers who are proofreaders, editors, people who go over the game and try to make sure that we haven't made any mistakes and that it's as clear as possible to people who will be unboxing the game and trying to learn the game at home. So I've tried to add all those checks and balances while keeping the game fairly under wraps until we actually announce it to the public after we've made it.
Makes sense. I like that system. That's cool. That's really, really cool. And so when it comes to actually launching the games, not on Kickstarter, on your own website, what are the main marketing channels that you're using to drive traffic?
I mean, the main two, the biggest two are reviewers. So I have a network of probably around 700 different reviewers at this point that I don't regularly send games to all of them, but some of them more than others. But we send out thousands of review copies a year, not just of new games, but also of older games, because we've already put in the effort to make those games. I want to continually reprint them and sell them if people want them. And so reviewers are a huge part of that. And the other part is our own kind of internal social network community. We have a pretty big newsletter list. We're very active on Instagram, on Discord, on Facebook. We have Facebook groups for each of our games. And so I've really tried to continually cultivate that community, something that I definitely learned from Kickstarter, and brought it over to various social networks so that people can pick and choose how they want to interact with us. Our e-newsletter is still really one of the biggest things. Our e-newsletter has around 45,000 subscribers and an open rate of over 50%. So most of the people that actually subscribe to it are actively reading what we put out there once a month.
Interesting. How are you driving new, let's say, subscribers or even just customers in general then?
Yeah,
because a lot of that sounds like pre-existing, community that you have, but like, yeah, where are like the new ones coming from?
That's a great question. That is a question that I'm continually asking myself, because I haven't seen all that much growth on the newsletter in quite some time. Some people subscribe, some people don't subscribe. Not a big difference in a while. So the reviews are still a part of that. The reviews expose people to our games that are well outside of our network. Whether or not those people actively engage after that or go and buy the game is a tougher part of the equation. So we are right now experimenting a little bit with some social media advertising, like more traditional advertising on social media, to try to reach people who currently, like specifically, we're targeting people who don't already follow us on Facebook or don't already follow us on Instagram, to try to reach that audience. But that's definitely a work in progress.
Yeah, I read on your blog that you did hire someone specifically for Facebook ads, right?
Yeah, Facebook and Instagram. Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, we're big fans over here of that channel. We found a lot of success there. So I hope you do as well. It looks like you already have been getting some success. It looked like for your latest launch, it worked pretty well, right? For getting people to sign up to be notified about the launch. If I understand that correctly.
That was one of the things I wanted to experiment with. I do a little better at getting those pre-launch signups. Doesn't guarantee that someone will buy the game, but at least guarantees they get that notification when the game goes live. And yeah, it was one of our best pre-launch sign-up numbers for quite some time with Apiary.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear. So I'm going to you're off Kickstarter, and would you recommend to creators that they launch on Kickstarter still? Or what's your recommendation to new creators with a new game?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I still, even though I'm off Kickstarter as a creator, I'm still very active there and on crowdfunding in general as a backer. I love the platform. I think it's great for, I think it's great for new creators. I think it's a great way to kind of test what it feels like to run a business without all of the risk of just jumping right in and spending a bunch of money on a product that you don't know if people want or not. So yeah, for that reason, I think it's a great way to start.
That's it. Yeah. Yes. The answer.
Yes.
How do you, there's been other crowdfunding platforms popping up specifically for games. You have GameFound. It's been around now for a little while, but also BackerKit with their own competing crowdfunding platform. Do you have an opinion on the differences between, let's say, Kickstarter, GameFound, and BackerKit in regards to, I guess like how a creator should choose between the three?
Yes, definitely still a question that's in progress. I think the different platforms have different pros and cons. I think GameFound, in my opinion, is the one that is innovating the fastest, and with some innovations that are both beneficial for the creator and the for creators and for the people who are using the platform, the backers. Namely, I really like on GameFound that if you sign up to get a launch notification, the creator can pair that with a special benefit, maybe a little benefit, and you can start getting updates about the project just by really a single click, which is great. If you sign up on Kickstarter for pre-launch notification, that's all you get. You get the one notification, but you aren't getting notifications or updates leading up to the launch of the project. GameFound has some other benefits too. The one thing I'd still like to see on GameFound that they're not doing that Kickstarter does is I think Kickstarter does a great job of, like, Mark, if I follow you on Kickstarter, I can see what you back. And if I find that, I like Mark's taste in games or books or whatever you're backing on Kickstarter, I get a notification about that, and I'm probably more likely to check it out because it's almost like you're saying, I like this thing that Mark likes too. GameFound isn't doing that yet, and I'm hoping they add that. There are definitely some creators and backers that I'd want to follow along on GameFound if they have similar tastes to me.
Have you been following along with BackerKit at all?
A little bit. I get notifications every now and then for BackerKit. I feel like it isn't being used quite as much. What do you think? Have you followed them? What killer feature do you think they offer?
I don't really know, to be honest. I mean, I guess it's to me, I think it's probably like the boutique aspect to it. So they're going to provide a lot more like hands-on support to the creators. I think that's mainly it. Well, and I mean, they also have, I would say, like integration from like pre-launch the campaign to the pledge manager, which I know GameFound has as well. And so, just in terms of innovation on features and just being integrated from like end to end, from pre-launch to post-campaign, they have that over Kickstarter right now. It's just Kickstarter just brings such a massive community, to the actual launches themselves that you can tap into. That I think is, it's definitely a huge benefit. Huge benefit. Just the brand of Kickstarter as well. I mean, you look at the actual numbers of the campaigns launching on GameFound and BackerKit, it's like not even close to the amount of campaigns that are launching on Kickstarter. But that's not always, the one metric that's most important. So I would say also we try to stay as agnostic as possible here because we think that makes us more credible as well in terms of really looking at things objectively. So yeah, I wouldn't say that it's we would lean towards Kickstarter pretty much always, but we're still looking at these other platforms too. All right, I have this question this is probably the question I wanted to get your feedback on the most. I feel like it can be like a polarizing topic about discounting, early birds, exclusives, like these like marketing tactics. What are your thoughts on using tactics like that, even like ethically or morally, philosophically, for you?
Yeah. So I guess my quick story behind the thing that made me realize that I didn't want to do exclusives was when we launched this game Euphoria, the second game that we launched. I included some fancy resource bits in the game, and I made them exclusive because that was that was the norm at the time. You'd put some fancy stuff in the game and you'd call it exclusive and hope that people would back it then instead of waiting for later. And as soon as the game came out, people were raving about these resources. They loved playing with them, and they loved showing them to friends who could not buy the resources because we had made them exclusive to Kickstarter. And immediately, once I started getting to hear those requests, compliments and requests, it didn't feel right. It didn't feel good. I invested in making this special thing, but I couldn't offer it to people. And so there probably is like an ethical or moral side to that. But mostly, I had stumbled upon something that brought joy to people, and I had somehow limited the amount of joy to the number of original copies of this product that we had printed. And that didn't feel right. And so from then on, I kind of took a bigger perspective. I was trying to look outside of that first print run for that game, for any game, and look for the long tail. Look at the many different people in the next 10 years who might discover this game and might discover a component in the game. And when they come to me and say, hey, can I still buy this special component, even if it costs extra? I want to be able to say yes to that. And so that's been my philosophy ever since with exclusives. We can go into early birds too, but yeah, do you have any thoughts about that for the exclusive side of things?
No, that makes sense to me. Yeah, I think the logic makes sense. I also agree. I mean, it's like I don't really know if they're like what like the moral or ethical side of it is. It's like you're looking at it logically and like what feels right to you as well, emotionally, I would say, and strategically too. And I think the logic makes sense. Yeah, early birds. What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, early birds, almost in some ways, are the extreme of exclusives, because you're saying here's a special price, or here's a special thing that you get if you are a backer in the first 48 hours. So not just if you're a backer of the first campaign, which would be an exclusive, you're backing something for then, you're limiting an exclusive to people who happen to discover it and happen to back it in that first time frame. And I can understand the temptation. You want your project to launch strongly. You want it to have a great first day, first 48 hours. But I think I greatly prefer methods, both as a backer and as a creator, where if you do something like that, if you do something special within that first day or 48 hours, that you are creating something together that anyone can benefit from. Like the campaigns that say, okay, if we get 1,000 backers on day one, everyone who backs this campaign will get this new miniature or this new card pack or things like that. And that way you are winning by being there on day one, but you're also helping everyone else who was there during the campaign. And from what I've heard from backers, from what I can tell, there are very few people who want those things limited to just themselves. They want to share those things with other people too, if they are excited about that game existing or that product existing. So yeah, that's my take on early birds.
Yeah, I like the way you're thinking about it. I mean, historically, we have used early birds extensively at LaunchBoom over the past 10 years of launching products. And I mean, I would say that to a certain extent, it works, right? Like we've seen it work quite a bit in terms of, you're playing into the I'll call it the human hijack of having something that is scarce and like the urgency of getting behind it, or getting it within a certain time frame. And yeah, we've definitely seen it work. Although I love how you're like challenging that notion. I know this isn't like a new thing for you, but I like hearing your thoughts on this because there are other ways to think about it and still get the same benefit of ultimately getting people to back your project, but in a way that could like include more people. It actually could possibly be more effective. So we're always on the lookout for other strategies that may work. I know you talked with Leah at Kelp. Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, Leah at Kelp. And, she went through our system and one of the things that we do in the pre-launch is we do lead generation, but the big thing is that give people the opportunity to put down a $1 deposit.
I was going to ask about that. I'm fascinated by this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go on. Keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. The $1 deposit to like lock in some type of, we call it like VIP offer. You can call it whatever you want, right? But it's basically something that they are going to get for putting down $1. In like people will do like for Botany, another campaign did like expansion, like Brilliant Blue Botanicals was what everyone got. And that was also available during the campaign, but basically they were getting it at like a big, huge discount by putting down $1 now. So we found that to be really valuable because it's a really, really great indicator of purchase intent during the pre-launch, and it allows you to better optimize your advertising, which is the main source of traffic that we're using for pre-launch. So we found it to be a really effective tactic. And anyways, where's the question here? Basically the question is, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that? I mean, you talked to Leia about it as well. Do you think like a strategy like that is something that might be interesting even for you to use? Not on Kickstarter, but like leading up to the launch of one of your products on your own site?
Absolutely. I'm fascinated by it. Yeah. And the numbers that Leia mentioned, I think she said maybe around 40%, maybe 45% of people who pay that dollar often end up backing, which is, does that sound right to you? Around 40?
Yeah, we usually, like, conservatively, we have people use like 30% as the number, but in the game space, we've been seeing much larger, much higher conversion rates on the VIP list. Maybe because just the games community is more fanatical. I'm not entirely sure. But Botany was upwards of 60%. I haven't looked at the conversion rate on Kelp's project, which is doing fantastic. Just over 200,000 in 2 days. But yeah, it can be quite high. It's been quite high.
I think that's incredible. You probably have a better number than this, but for anyone listening that hears that and wonders why it's not 100%, more so it's why isn't it like 5%? Because usually if you get pre-launch signups, the people who sign up for that launch, only around 5, maybe 10% of them, if you get lucky, actually end up backing the project. So increasing that to 30, 40, 50%, that's incredible. I have thought about it. I've thought about it a lot since Leia mentioned those numbers. Previously, a strategy that I considered is asking people essentially to buy a $5 gift card from the Stonemaier Games web store, and then use that as the kind of the foot in the door technique for later on when we officially announce the game. And partially to use that as a way of determining demand, because one of the biggest puzzles that I have to solve every day, whenever we print a new print run or especially a new product, is how many do we make? Because we don't have the benefit of a crowdfunding campaign to inform that number. And so it's one thing for me to ask people, are you interested in this game, whether I give it vaguely or give specifics about the game? Are you interested in buying a copy? I think there's a very different number there that have, or a very different precision level that happens if someone has invested even just a little bit of money in it. And so that's something that I'm thinking about using more as a way of gauging demand than getting someone's foot in the door. But the conversion numbers, I think, give me confidence, I think, to try that and actually have a lot more accuracy for that. There's no the people who spend a few dollars. You've chosen $1. Is that a specific amount opposed to, I don't know, maybe $5?
You can go up. Yeah, we just found that starting with $1 is the best, because it still is such a big indicator of their likelihood that they're going to actually follow through the purchase. That you try to basically make the barrier to entry, so to speak, as low as possible from a monetary perspective. I mean, you could say, okay, we'll make it like 1 cent, which we've actually never tried, but I think $1 makes it a little bit more tangible. But yeah, we've gone up to $100 reservations. I wouldn't recommend that, of course, unless you have a very expensive product, which I'm assuming most people don't that are listening to this. But yeah, 1 to 10 is like the range that you would see most often. Like we had a campaign, Alpha Clash did $10 deposits, did quite well on that as well. Yeah, so it can work really, really well. There was a question I was going to ask you, totally slipped my mind on that. Oh no, it wasn't a question. I wanted to just comment really quickly that you said you can use it to gauge demand, which is, very intelligent that you're saying that, because that's a big reason, or a big, that's one of the most valuable pieces of using this system, is that you can actually go through a testing and validation process, put the metrics into even a simple predictive model, and get a really good idea of what your actual, let's say, return will be, even how much you'll raise, based off of using some like pretty basic math, to be honest. Just because the data that you're collecting from this type of strategy is such high quality in terms of signifying purchase intent. So yeah, I can try it out. Let me know or reach out to me if you have questions on how to implement it as well. I'd love to try to help you out with that on the next one.
So I really like that you mentioned that, because I think one of the things that I see creators do too often is they launch too soon. Leia with Kelp did not do that. They seemed to take their time. They really built up that community, that audience, and they were gauging interest the whole way with things like that $1 deposit. And I think that is a great way, like you said, validation in advance of knowing that now is the time that we can launch. Like, we're ready. We have enough people interested in this, rather than launching it with a whimper. So yeah, I just wanted to say I really like that on multiple levels.
Yeah. Okay, and just a few more questions, and then we'll let you go, Jamey. So I'm just curious. I mean, it seems like you're doing a lot. Like I talked about at the beginning, you're giving a lot of time. You're writing. You're running the company. I'm always fascinated to see, like, how are you even breaking down your day? Like, what does it look like? You're going to jump off this interview. What's going to happen next?
I'll probably eat lunch soon after this interview. But yeah, usually my day from the morning, I work from 7 to 11, usually reactively. So I'm responding to emails. I'm putting out little fires, and a little bit of creativity mixed in there too, where I'm usually the morning is when I'm working on either video or blog post creation. The afternoon is typically spent on project management. So I usually work from around 11:30 to 6 on all the different products that we have in motion right now, and projects that we have in motion. Some development, some game development in there, but mostly just project management, dealing with a bunch of different people, making sure everything's as it should go for all the different levels of project management. And then in the evening, I usually have 2 hours in the evening that I spend on game design. The schedule for me is typically 7 days a week, but my weekends are more flexible because other people work more normal schedules and are more available for social stuff on weekends. But yeah, that's my typical schedule.
Clearly, you love what you do. I love it.
I do.
Sounds pretty similar. Sounds pretty similar to me.
Nice.
Actually, minus the game design.
Yeah.
Last question for you. What is, like, one, maybe two big goals in your life that you're looking to achieve that you haven't yet?
That's a question I need to ask myself more often, Mark. Because I've a few, like, one of my big goals ever since I was a kid, and something that I continually decided that was important to me, was that I wanted to publish a game and run my own business. I didn't exactly know at the time why those things were important to me, but I thought they were, and they ended up being important for various reasons. And I have the pleasure and the honor of doing those things. The other goal that I had was to publish a book, which I have done. I have my crowdfunding book that is published, but someday I'd probably also like to see if I can have a novel published, if it's good enough to do that. So that's one thing maybe left on my bucket list a little bit. But most importantly, I've kind of stumbled into this career where I've realized that it makes me really, really happy to bring joy to people. That may not always be through games, but if I can find new ways to do that over the course of my life, I will be really happy with the way that I live my life. So that's kind of an ongoing goal for me.
I love it. Well, thanks for sharing that. I find that I just love hearing what makes people tick, and also what they're looking to do. So appreciate your time, Jamey. It was awesome. It was extremely informative as well. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening as well.
Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome.